My name is Brooke. I'm 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago I bought my first house. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life, the culmination of 8 years of saving sacrifice and sleepless nights. I imagined my parents would be proud, maybe even throw me a little celebration. Instead, they showed up at my door with court papers demanding I hand over the keys to my jobless sister. I never imagined my own parents would drag me to court over something I bought with my own money. Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe because trust me, you're going to want to hear how this story ends. The judge's decision changed everything in ways my family never saw coming. Growing up in a small town in Indiana, I learned early on that love in my family came with conditions. I was the younger daughter, 5 years behind my sister Diane, and from the moment I could understand words, I knew she was the favorite. It wasn't subtle. When Diane wanted a new dress for the school dance, my mother took her shopping at the nice boutique downtown. When I needed clothes, we went to the thrift store and Mom would say, "You're still growing, honey. No point wasting money on something you'll outgrow in 6 months." Diane got a new bike for her 10th birthday, shiny and red with a white basket. I got her old one repainted blue to make it seem special. The phrase I heard most often was, "Diane is the oldest Brooke. You need to understand that she comes first." And I did understand. I understood that no matter how hard I tried, how many A's I brought home, how many times I cleaned the house without being asked, I would always be second. So somewhere around age 13, I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I decided I wouldn't wait for my parents' approval or support. I would build my own future. High school became my escape and my battlefield. While Diane coasted through with C's and spent her weekends at parties, I buried myself in textbooks. I joined every club that offered scholarship opportunities. I worked at the local diner every weekend, saving tips in a shoebox under my bed. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, believed in me when my own parents barely noticed my efforts. She helped me apply to 15 different colleges, and when the acceptance letter from State University arrived with a full academic scholarship, I cried in her office for 20 minutes. My parents' reaction was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, dear," my mother said, barely looking up from the television where she was watching Diane's favorite show. My father patted my shoulder absently. "Just don't forget about your family when you're off being smart." Diane rolled her eyes. "College is overrated anyway. I'm taking a gap year to find myself." That gap year turned into 2, then 3, then became permanent. College was the first time I felt like I could breathe. I moved into the dorms at State University with 2 suitcases and a desperate hunger to prove myself. But a full scholarship only covered tuition and basic housing. I needed money for books, food, and the 1,000 little expenses that add up. So I worked. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously, a feat that still amazes me when I look back. Monday through Friday, I woke up at 5 in the morning to open the campus coffee shop, making lattes for bleary-eyed students until my 8 o'clock classes started. Between classes, I worked as a student assistant in the admissions office, filing paperwork and answering phones. Friday and Saturday nights, I picked up shifts at a retail store in town, folding clothes and dealing with impatient customers until closing at 10. My roommate Sarah thought I was crazy. "Brooke, you're going to burn out," she'd say, watching me stumble into our dorm room at 11 at night only to study until 2 in the morning. But I couldn't slow down. Every paycheck went into my savings account minus the bare minimum for instant noodles and the occasional pizza. I watched that number grow slowly, painfully. $200 became $500. $500 became $1,000. It was intoxicating knowing that every dollar belonged to me, that I was building something my parents couldn't touch or take away. Meanwhile, Diane was back home sleeping in her childhood bedroom, bouncing between minimum wage jobs that she'd quit after a few months. "The manager was mean," she'd tell our parents. Or, "My co-workers were jealous of me." Our parents never questioned her excuses. They just handed her $20 bills for gas money and took her shopping when she complained about being bored. When I came home for Thanksgiving my sophomore year, Diane had a new laptop. "Mom and Dad got it for me," she explained. I'm thinking about taking some online classes. She never did. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing. I'd managed to save $10,000 by working throughout college, a sum that felt enormous after 4 years of scraping by. I had job offers from 3 companies, and I chose the one in Chicago, a mid-sized advertising agency that paid well and had room for growth. The day I signed my offer letter, I called my parents. "I got a job in Chicago," I said, unable to hide the pride in my voice. $55,000 a year to start. "That's far away," my mother said, her tone flat. "What about Diane?" "She's been having a hard time lately. Could you talk to your boss about getting her a job too?" "Mom, Diane didn't go to college. She doesn't have experience in marketing." "You could train her. That's what sisters do." I closed my eyes and counted to 10. "I'll see what I can do." I never brought it up with my boss. I couldn't risk my new job by recommending someone who couldn't hold down a shift at a fast food restaurant. Chicago became my home. I rented a tiny studio apartment in a neighborhood that was more affordable than safe, sharing the space with a roommate named Jessica, who worked as a paralegal. We split the $900 monthly rent, leaving me with enough to continue saving. My apartment was a 15-minute walk from the L train, and I made that walk every morning at 6:30, rain or shine, snow or brutal summer heat. The agency was demanding, but I thrived on the pressure. I took on extra projects, volunteered for the difficult clients, stayed late when everyone else went home. Within 2 years, I was promoted to senior account manager. My salary jumped to $75,000. I didn't tell my parents about the promotion. I'd learned that sharing good news only led to requests for money. Instead, I focused on my goal. I wanted a house. Not an apartment, not a condo, but a real house with a yard and a front porch and a place to plant flowers. I wanted something permanent, something that proved I'd made it. So I tightened my budget even further. I packed lunch every single day, turkey sandwiches and carrot sticks and apples. I brought my own coffee in a thermos instead of buying it at the fancy cafe near my office. I said no to girls' nights out and weekend trips and new clothes. My coworkers thought I was antisocial, but I didn't care. Every month, I transferred at least $2,000 into my house fund savings account. Years passed in a blur of work and saving, and work. I was promoted again at 29 this time to account director. My salary hit $90,000. The number in my savings account climbed steadily. $20,000, $40,000, $60,000. I researched mortgages, obsessively calculated payments, studied housing markets. Chicago was too expensive, but the suburbs were manageable. I just needed to be patient a little longer. By the time I turned 31, I had saved $190,000. My bank account was proof of 8 years of sacrifice, of every early morning and late night, of every social event I'd skipped, and every vacation I'd declined. I started working with a real estate agent named Marcus, a patient man in his 40s who understood what this meant to me. We looked at dozens of houses. Too expensive, too small, wrong neighborhood, needed too many repairs. And then last October, Marcus called me. "I found something," he said. "It just came on the market this morning. I think you're going to love it." The house was in a suburb called Riverside, 40 minutes from downtown Chicago. It was a 2-story colonial painted pale yellow with white trim sitting on a 1/4-acre lot. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with windows that let in the morning sun. The backyard had a huge cherry tree, its branches spreading like arms offering a hug. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew. This was it. This was home. The asking price was $350,000. With my savings, I could put down 20% and still have a comfortable emergency fund. My mortgage payment would be manageable on my salary. I made an offer that same afternoon. The sellers accepted the next day. 3 weeks later, I sat in a lawyer's office signing page after page of documents, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote my name. Brooke Anderson, sole owner. No co-signers. No help from anyone. Just me and 8 years of determination. The day I got the keys, I drove to Riverside and sat in my empty living room crying happy tears. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. The house smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I walked through each room slowly, planning where furniture would go, imagining hosting Thanksgiving dinners, thinking about maybe someday having a family of my own here. I waited a week before telling my parents. I wanted to enjoy the moment privately first, to let the reality sink in without anyone else's opinions. Finally, on a Sunday afternoon, I called home. My mother answered on the third ring. "Hi, Mom. I have some news." "What is it?" She sounded distracted, probably watching television. "I bought a house." Silence. Long enough that I checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "You what?" "I bought a house. In Riverside, it's a suburb outside Chicago. 3 bedrooms, beautiful yard. I closed on it last week." More silence. Then, "You should have told us first. We could have helped you find something better." The response stung, but I pushed past it. "I had a great real estate agent, and I'm really happy with it." "How much did you pay?" $350,000. "That seems expensive. Did you get an inspection? What about the neighborhood? Is it safe?" "Yes, Mom. I got an inspection. The neighborhood is great. I really think you'll like it when you see it." "Well," she paused. "I suppose congratulations are in order, though it would have been nice to be included in such a big decision." I hung up feeling deflated. Not quite the reaction I'd hoped for, but not surprising either. At least it was done, and they knew. 3 days later, my mother called back. "Your father and I have been talking. We'd like to come see this house of yours, and Diane wants to come too." My stomach tightened. "Sure. When were you thinking?" "This Saturday. We'll leave early, be there by noon." "Okay, I'll make lunch." I spent Friday evening cleaning every surface until it gleamed. I bought fresh flowers for the kitchen table. I planned a menu, simple but nice chicken salad sandwiches and pasta salad and cookies from the bakery. I wanted everything to be perfect. Maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me as successful as someone who'd accomplished something worth celebrating. Saturday morning, I woke up at 7 and started cooking. By 11:30, the house smelled amazing and looked spotless. At 12:15, I heard car doors slam in the driveway. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to the front door, opening it with what I hoped was a welcoming smile. My father walked up the path first, his face neutral. My mother followed, her eyes already scanning the exterior with a critical expression. And behind them, Diane wearing designer sunglasses and a bored expression. "Welcome," I said, stepping aside to let them in. Diane walked past me without a word, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. She glanced around the living room with her nose slightly wrinkled. "It's smaller than I expected." My mother was already walking toward the kitchen. I followed her, my heart sinking. "Would you like a tour first, or should we eat?" "Let's see what we're dealing with," Mom said. We walked through the house, and with every room my mother found something to criticize. "This carpet is dated. You'll need to replace it." In the bathroom, "These fixtures are old, very old." In the kitchen, "The cabinets are original, aren't they? They'll need updating." My father said nothing, just nodded along with whatever my mother said. Diane trailed behind us occasionally, sighing dramatically. When we got to the master bedroom, she said, "I guess it's okay if you're into the whole suburban thing. Personally, I'd want something more modern." We sat down for lunch at 1 o'clock. I'd set the table with my new dishes, poured iced tea into glasses, arranged everything nicely. But the conversation was stilted and uncomfortable. My mother picked at her sandwich. Diane spent most of the meal on her phone. My father ate in silence. Finally, Diane looked up from her phone. "Mom, remember you said when I'm ready to settle down, you'd help me with a house?" My mother's face softened immediately, the critical expression melting into warmth. "Of course, sweetie. We're still saving for that." Something sharp twisted in my chest. They were saving to help Diane buy a house. They'd never offered to help me with anything. "How much have you saved so far?" Diane asked. "About 30,000, my father said, speaking for the first time since we'd sat down. "We're hoping to have 50 by next year." I stared at my plate. $30,000. They'd saved $30,000 for Diane while I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for my own education, my own car, my own everything. Diane leaned back in her chair. Well, maybe I should start looking soon then. My mother reached over and patted her hand. Whenever you're ready, baby. I stood abruptly grabbing plates even though people weren't finished. I'll get dessert. In the kitchen, I gripped the edge of the counter and breathed slowly. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. Behind me, I heard voices from the dining room low enough that they thought I couldn't hear. It's not fair, Diane was saying. She gets everything. Don't worry, my mother replied. We'll figure something out. Everything I'd never gotten anything. Every single thing I had, I'd earned myself. I brought out the cookies on a plate, my hands steady, even though my heart was racing. We ate dessert in near silence. As soon as it was polite, my mother stood. We should get going. It's a long drive. At the door, my mother gave me a brief hug that felt obligatory. Thank you for lunch. You're welcome. My father patted my shoulder. Nice place. Diane walked past without saying goodbye. I watched them drive away, standing on my front porch as the sun beat down. Then I went inside, closed the door, and let myself cry for exactly 10 minutes before pulling myself together. That night, my mother called. Brooke, I need you to send me a copy of your purchase agreement. Why? For family records. We like to keep documentation of important things. Mom, it's my house. I don't think you need a copy of my private financial documents. Brooke, don't be difficult. I'm your mother. Just email it to me. Against my better judgment, I scanned the documents and sent them. I told myself it was harmless, just paperwork. Over the next 2 weeks, my mother called 6 more times. Each conversation was an interrogation. How much was my mortgage payment? What was my interest rate? Did I have a co-signer? How much had I put down? Who was listed on the deed? Just me, Mom, I finally said, exasperated. I'm the only owner. I bought it by myself. I see, she said, her tone unreadable. That's interesting. Why is it interesting? No reason. I'll talk to you later, Brooke. She hung up, and I was left staring at my phone, a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Something was wrong. I could feel it. But I had no idea how wrong things were about to get. The call came on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after my family's visit. My mother's voice was formal, almost cold. Brooke, your father and I need to see you. This weekend. It's important. Can't we just talk on the phone? No. This needs to be in person. Family meeting. My hands went cold. What's this about? We'll discuss it Saturday. Be here by 1 o'clock. She hung up before I could ask anything else. I spent the week in a state of low-level panic. What could possibly require a family meeting? Was someone sick? Had something happened? But if it were a health crisis, my mother would have just told me. This felt different. Worse. Saturday morning, I drove the 3 hours back to Indiana with my stomach in knots. I arrived at my childhood home at exactly 1 o'clock. Diane's car was already in the driveway, a newer model than mine, despite the fact that I knew she'd been unemployed for the past 4 months. I knocked, then let myself in. My parents were sitting in the living room, positioned on the sofa like they were conducting a business meeting. Diane sat in the armchair, her expression smug. Sit down, Brooke, my father said, gesturing to the remaining chair. I sat, my hands clasped in my lap. What's going on? My mother took a deep breath. We've been thinking about your house. What about it? It's not fair to Diane. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? Your sister has been struggling. She doesn't have the opportunities you have. She needs stability. We think you should transfer the house to her name. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words didn't make sense. You want me to give Diane my house? The house I saved 8 years to buy. Not give, my mother said quickly. Transfer. Put it in her name. That's the same thing. My father leaned forward. You're doing well, Brooke. You have a good job, you're financially stable. You can always buy another house later. Diane needs it now. I need it now too. I live there. Diane finally spoke, her voice syrupy sweet. It's just that some of us don't have everything handed to them like you do. I turned to stare at her. Handed to me? Are you kidding? I worked 3 jobs in college while you slept until noon. I saved for 8 years while you quit job after job. Nothing was handed to me. That's enough, my mother snapped. This isn't about the past. This is about doing what's right for family. What's right is that each person keeps what they earned. My mother's face hardened. Brooke, we're not asking. We're telling you. Transfer the house to Diane or there will be consequences. What consequences? My father stood up, his face stern. We're done supporting you. If you won't help your sister, then you're on your own. I've been on my own since I was 18. Fine. Then we're done. Done with you, with your selfishness, with everything. Transfer the house or we're cutting you off completely. I stood too, my legs shaking but my voice steady. You're disowning me because I won't give away what I worked for. We're giving you a choice, my mother said. Family or that house. I looked at Diane, who was watching with barely concealed glee. I looked at my parents, these people who'd raised me but never really seen me. And I made my choice. I'm keeping my house. Diane's smile faltered. My mother gasped. My father's face turned red. Then get out, he said. Get out of this house and don't come back until you're ready to do the right thing. I grabbed my purse and walked to the door. My hand was on the knob when my mother called out. You'll regret this, Brooke. We'll make sure of it. I didn't turn around. I walked out, got in my car, and drove away. The 3-hour drive home was a blur of tears and anger and disbelief. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was dark. I sat in the car for 20 minutes, staring at my house, the house I'd dreamed of, and worked for and earned. The house they wanted to take from me. I went inside, locked the door, and called the one person I trusted. Sarah, my old college roommate, and still my closest friend. Sarah, can you talk? Always. What's wrong? I told her everything. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Brooke, that's insane. They can't seriously expect you to just hand over your house. They do, and they threaten to cut me off if I don't. You've been cut off your whole life. You don't need them. I know, but they're still my parents. Parents don't do this. I'm sorry, but they don't. We talked for another hour. By the time we hung up, I felt steadier. Sarah was right. I'd built my life without them. I could continue without them. But I didn't know that the fight had only just begun. 2 weeks passed in tense silence. I didn't call my parents, and they didn't call me. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep my mind occupied. I started jogging in the evenings, running past houses where families sat on porches where everything looked normal and happy. I wondered what it would feel like to have that kind of family. On a Saturday morning in early November, I was in my front yard planting tulip bulbs for spring. The weather was crisp, the sky clear. I was actually feeling peaceful for the first time in weeks, my hands in the dirt, imagining how beautiful the flowers would be in April. A dark sedan pulled up to the curb. A man in a suit got out carrying a briefcase. My first thought was that he was selling something. I stood up, brushing dirt off my jeans. "Can I help you?" He walked up my driveway, his face professionally neutral. "Are you Brooke Anderson?" "Yes. You've been served." He handed me a large manila envelope, then turned and walked back to his car. I stood there holding the envelope, my heart beginning to pound. Served with what? I went inside, my hands shaking as I opened the envelope. Inside was a thick stack of legal documents. The first page made my blood run cold. Civil lawsuit. Property dispute. Plaintiffs: Robert and Susan Anderson. Defendant: Brooke Anderson. I sank onto my couch and kept reading. My parents were suing me. They were actually suing me for my house. They claimed that they'd given me money over the years to save for the house, that there was a verbal family agreement, that any property purchased would be shared with Diane. They claimed I'd used undue influence and had breached family trust. Every word was a lie. Every single claim was completely fabricated. I kept reading, my horror growing. They were asking the court to either force me to transfer full ownership to Diane or pay them $350,000 as compensation. They'd hired a lawyer, a real lawyer from a big firm in Indianapolis. The hearing date was set for 3 weeks away. I sat there for an hour reading and rereading the documents, unable to process what was happening. My own parents were taking me to court. They were lying under oath, making up stories about giving me money, claiming agreements that never existed. All to give Diane my house. Finally, I picked up my phone and started searching for lawyers. I needed help, and I needed it immediately. I found a property law attorney named James Fletcher. His office was in downtown Chicago, and his website said he specialized in real estate disputes. I called and left a message trying to keep my voice steady. He called back within an hour. "Ms. Anderson, I got your message. Tell me what's happening." I explained everything, my voice breaking several times. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Ms. Anderson, this is one of the most baseless lawsuits I've seen in 20 years of practice. Can they win? Not if you have documentation that you purchased the property with your own funds." "I do. I have everything. 8 years of bank statements, my mortgage application, the purchase agreement, closing documents, all of it." "Then you're going to be fine, but I won't lie to you. This is going to be emotionally difficult." "It already is." "I know, but we're going to fight this, and we're going to win." We made an appointment for Monday. I spent the weekend gathering every piece of financial documentation I could find. Bank statements going back to my first job in college, pay stubs, tax returns, my mortgage pre-approval letter, the purchase agreement with only my name on it, the closing documents showing I'd paid the down payment from my personal savings account. The evidence was overwhelming and clear. I'd earned every penny myself. My parents hadn't contributed a single dollar. Monday afternoon, I met James at his office. He was in his mid-50s with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. We spent 2 hours going through everything. "This is excellent," he said, examining my bank statements. "You have a clear paper trail showing years of deposits from your employment, no deposits from your parents, and documentation that you were the sole purchaser. So we'll win. I'm confident we will. But Brooke, I need to prepare you. This is going to hurt. No matter how clear the law is, having your parents attack you like this, it's painful." "I know." "Do you have support friends, other family?" "I have friends. That's it." He nodded sympathetically. "That might be all you need." The next 3 weeks were a special kind of torture. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake at night, my mind spinning through every possible outcome. What if the judge somehow believed my parents' lies? What if I lost my house? What if they actually won? During the day, I functioned on autopilot. My boss pulled me aside one afternoon. "Brooke, are you okay? You seem distracted." "Family stuff," I said vaguely. "I'm handling it." "If you need time off." "I don't. Thank you, though." I couldn't tell people what was happening. How do you explain that your own parents are trying to steal your house? It sounded insane even to me, and I was living it. The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in my living room looking around at the home I'd made, the furniture I'd carefully chosen, the photos on the walls, the bookshelf I'd assembled myself. This was mine. I'd earned it. I'd worked for it. They couldn't take it away. They couldn't. The morning of the hearing, I put on my navy blue suit, the one I wore for important client presentations. I wanted to look professional, credible, like someone who had her life together, even though I felt like I was falling apart. James picked me up at 8. The courthouse was in downtown Chicago, an imposing building of gray stone that made my stomach clench. We parked and walked inside through security up to the 3rd floor. And there they were. My parents and Diane standing outside the courtroom with their lawyer. Diane wore an expensive-looking dress I knew she couldn't have afforded herself. My mother wore her church clothes. My father was in a suit I'd never seen before, probably bought just for this. Diane saw me first. Her eyes lit up with something that looked like triumph. My mother turned her face cold and set. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. I walked past them without a word, following James into the courtroom. The room was smaller than I'd expected, not like the dramatic courtrooms on TV. There were 2 tables facing a judge's bench, a few rows of seats for observers. Everything was wood-paneled and official-looking, the kind of place where serious decisions got made. We sat at the defendant's table. My hands were shaking, so I clasped them in my lap. James laid out folders of documents organized and tabbed. He looked calm, confident. I tried to borrow some of that confidence for myself. My parents and Diane entered with their lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looked far too pleased with himself. His name was Mr. Davidson, I'd learned from the court papers. He was from a big Indianapolis firm, and I couldn't imagine how much my parents were paying him. Then again, they had $30,000 saved for Diane. Maybe that's where it was going. The bailiff stood. All rise. The Honorable Judge Margaret Riley presiding. We stood as the judge entered. She was a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She sat, and we all sat. We're here for Anderson versus Anderson case number 47623. This is a property dispute. Mr. Davidson, you're representing the plaintiffs. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Fletcher for the defendant. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Davidson, present your case. Davidson stood buttoning his suit jacket. Your Honor, this is a case about family trust and verbal agreements that have been broken. I watched him pace slowly in front of the judge's bench, his voice smooth and practiced. The plaintiffs, Robert and Susan Anderson, have 2 daughters. They've always believed in treating their children equally and supporting them both as they built their lives. Over the past decade, they gave the defendant, their younger daughter, Brooke, substantial financial support. Cash gifts for birthdays, holidays, help with living expenses during college and beyond. They did this with the understanding clearly communicated to Brooke that when she was ready to purchase a home, that home would be shared with her sister Diane. I felt my jaw clench. Every word was a lie. The defendant took that money, saved it, and used it to purchase a property at 847 Maple Street in Riverside. But instead of honoring the family agreement, instead of doing what was right, she put only her name on the deed. She shut her sister out of what should have been a joint family asset. Davidson turned to gesture at Diane, who had managed to make her eyes look teary. The plaintiff's daughter, Diane Anderson, has struggled financially. She's had difficulty finding stable employment. She trusted that her parents and her sister would support her as families should. Instead, she's been left with nothing while her sister lives in a $350,000 home that was purchased in part with family money. He sat down looking satisfied. Judge Riley looked at James. Mr. Fletcher. James stood his movement calm and deliberate. Your Honor, the plaintiff's case is built entirely on fabrications. Every single claim they've made is false, and we can prove it. He walked to our table and picked up a thick binder. Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit A through M. These are bank statements for Brooke Anderson covering the period from August 2014 to October 2024. 10 years of complete financial records. He approached the bench and handed the binder to Judge Riley. She opened it and began to page through. What you'll see, Your Honor, is that every deposit into Ms. Anderson's accounts came from her employment. Her paychecks from 3 part-time jobs during college, her salary from her current employer. There is not a single deposit that came from her parents. Not one. Judge Riley was nodding slowly, her eyes scanning the pages. Furthermore, James continued, we have Exhibit N, the mortgage pre-approval letter. This letter from First National Bank approved Ms. Anderson for a mortgage based solely on her income and credit history. No CO signers, no family support required. He handed that document up as well. Exhibit O is the purchase agreement for the property in question. You'll see only one name on this contract, Brooke Anderson. Exhibit P is the closing statement showing that Ms. Anderson paid the $70,000 down payment from her personal savings account. James turned to face my parents. The plaintiffs claim they gave Ms. Anderson substantial financial support over the years. We ask that they provide even one piece of evidence to support this claim. One bank transfer, one canceled check, one receipt. Anything. Davidson stood quickly. Your Honor, the money was given in cash over many years. There was no need for formal documentation within a family. Judge Riley looked at him over her reading glasses. Mr. Davidson, you're asking this court to transfer ownership of a $350,000 asset based on alleged cash gifts with no documentation whatsoever. We're relying on the verbal family agreement, Your Honor. What verbal agreement can you produce any witnesses to this agreement besides your clients and their other daughter? The agreement was made within the family, Your Honor. I see. Judge Riley looked back down at the documents James had provided. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning. I watched my parents. My mother's face was tight with stress. Diane had stopped looking teary and now just looked worried. My father stared at the table. Finally, Judge Riley looked up. Mr. Fletcher, call your first witness. I call Brooke Anderson to the stand. My legs felt weak as I stood and walked to the witness stand. The bailiff had me place my hand on a Bible and swear to tell the truth. I sat down, my heart hammering. James approached, his expression gentle. Ms. Anderson, did your parents ever give you money to save for a house? No, sir. Did they ever discuss an agreement about sharing property with your sister? No, sir. The first I heard of any of this was when they demanded I transfer my house to Diane 3 weeks after I bought it. How did you pay for your college education? I had an academic scholarship that covered tuition. I worked 3 jobs to pay for living expenses and books. Can you describe those jobs? I worked as a barista at the campus coffee shop from 5 to 8 every morning. I worked as a student assistant in the admissions office between classes. And I worked retail on weekends. After college, how did you save for your house? I got a job at an advertising agency in Chicago. I lived frugally, sharing a small studio apartment, packing lunches, avoiding unnecessary expenses. I saved at least a third of every paycheck for 8 years. Did your parents contribute to any of this? No, I haven't accepted money from my parents since I left for college at 18. James nodded. Thank you. No further questions. Davidson stood for cross-examination. Ms. Anderson, isn't it true that your parents supported you emotionally throughout your life? I suppose. And isn't it true that families often discuss sharing resources? We never discussed sharing this house. But you admit they raised you, fed you, clothed you for 18 years. Yes. Doesn't that count as financial support? James stood. Objection, Your Honor. That's the basic legal obligation of parents to minor children. Sustained, Judge Riley said. Mr. Davidson, do you have any relevant questions? Davidson looked frustrated. No further questions. I returned to my seat, my hands still shaking. Judge Riley leaned back in her chair, looking at all of us. I've reviewed all the evidence presented. Mr. Davidson, does your client have any documentation whatsoever to support their claims of financial support? Davidson stood. No, Your Honor, but verbal agreements are still binding. Not without any corroborating evidence, Counselor. Ms. Anderson has provided extensive documentation showing that she purchased this property entirely with her own funds. Your clients have provided nothing but their word against documented proof. Judge Riley picked up her gavel. I find the plaintiff's case to be without merit. The defendant has clearly and convincingly demonstrated that she purchased the property at 847 Maple Street with her own money, her own credit, and her own effort. There is no legal basis for transferring ownership to anyone else. She looked directly at my parents, her expression stern. Furthermore, I find this lawsuit to be frivolous and a waste of this court's time. Not only is the case dismissed, but I'm ordering the plaintiffs to pay the defendant's legal fees as a sanction for bringing a baseless claim. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Case dismissed. Court is adjourned. I couldn't breathe. I'd won. I'd actually won. Outside the courtroom, my parents stood with Davidson, who was explaining something about appeals in a voice that suggested he didn't actually think an appeal was worthwhile. I walked past them toward the exit, James beside me. "Brooke." I turned. Diane had broken away from our parents and was hurrying toward me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "You're really going to let this happen? You're really going to destroy our family over a house?" Something inside me snapped. For years I'd been patient, understanding, always trying to keep the peace. Not anymore. "I didn't destroy this family, Diane. You and Mom and Dad did when you decided I should give you something I worked 8 years for. We're family. Family doesn't sue each other for houses they bought with their own money. Family doesn't lie in court. Family doesn't ask you to give up everything you've earned because one person didn't bother to work for anything themselves." My mother had joined us now, her face red. "How dare you speak to your sister that way? How dare you drag me to court with lies, Mom? You stood up there and said you gave me money when you know that's not true. You said we had an agreement when we never did. You committed perjury for Diane. We only wanted what was fair for both our daughters." "Fair." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What's fair is that I got nothing but hand-me-downs growing up while Diane got everything new. What's fair is that I worked 3 jobs in college while Diane slept in her childhood bedroom. What's fair is that I saved for 8 years while Diane quit every job after a few months. This isn't about fair. It never was. This is about you thinking Diane deserves everything without having to earn any of it." My father finally spoke, his voice quiet. "We're still your parents, Brooke. Parents don't do what you just did." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. "If you walk away now, if you keep that house, you're choosing to be alone. No family, no support, nothing. I've been alone since I was 18, Mom. The only difference now is that I'm admitting it." I turned to walk away. My mother called after me, her voice sharp. "You'll regret this." I didn't look back. James and I walked out of the courthouse into cold November sunshine. The street was busy with lunchtime traffic, people hurrying past on their way to normal lives with normal problems. "You did great in there," James said. "Thank you. For everything. You're going to be okay, Brooke." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We walked to his car in silence. He drove me back to my office, and I thanked him again before getting out. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time, letting the reality sink in. I'd won. My house was mine. Legally, officially, finally mine. But I'd lost my family. Not that I'd really had them to begin with, but now it was official. Final. I drove home that evening in a daze. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a moment looking at my house. The pale yellow paint glowed in the late afternoon sun. The cherry tree in the backyard was bare now, but I could imagine it in spring, covered in pink blossoms. This was mine. No one could take it away. I went inside, locked the door, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. That night my phone buzzed with a text from Diane. I almost didn't look, but curiosity won out. "You're selfish, and you always have been. Mom and Dad gave you everything, and this is how you repay them. I hope you're happy being alone in that house because that's all you'll ever have." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed a reply. "They never gave me anything, and I'm not alone. I have friends who actually care about me, not about what they can take from me. Goodbye, Diane." I blocked her number. Then I blocked my mother's. Then my father's. It felt like closing a door on a part of my life that had never been healthy, had never really been family at all. It hurt. But it also felt right. The first few weeks after the trial were strange. I'd wake up expecting another crisis, another phone call, another demand. But my phone stayed quiet. No one called. No one texted. My family was really, truly gone. At first, the silence was painful. I'd been rejected before, but never so completely, never so officially. But as the days passed, something shifted. The silence became peaceful. I realized I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore, wasn't bracing myself for criticism or requests or drama. I could just exist. I threw myself into making my house truly mine. I painted the guest bedroom a soft sage green. I planted bulbs in the front flower beds, dozens of them, imagining the burst of color they'd bring in spring. I hung photos on the walls, pictures of my friends of places I'd traveled, of moments that made me happy. Not a single photo included my family. That chapter was closed. Work became easier too. Without the constant stress of family conflict, I could focus again. I landed a major client in December, a campaign that would keep my team busy well into the new year. My boss pulled me aside after the presentation. "Whatever was going on with you, I'm glad you've worked through it. This is the Brooke I hired." "Thank you," I said. "I'm glad too." My friends rallied around me in ways I hadn't expected. Sarah drove up from Indianapolis one weekend and helped me shop for furniture. "You need a proper dining room table," she declared. "One where you can host dinners and have people over." We found a beautiful oak table at an estate sale, solid and sturdy with space for 8. Sarah and I refinished it together in my garage, sanding and staining, while we talked about everything and nothing. When it was done, I positioned it in my dining room and stood back to admire it. "First dinner party is next month," Sarah said. "I'm inviting myself." "You're always invited." My neighbors started to feel like community. Patricia, the 70-year-old widow next door, brought over soup one cold January evening. "I made too much," she said, though we both knew she'd made it specifically for me. "Figured you might like some." We sat in my kitchen drinking tea, and she told me about her late husband, about raising 3 kids in this neighborhood, about the years she'd spent here. "This is a good place to build a life," she said. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too," I said, and I meant it. I made a rule for myself: no bitterness. It would have been easy to spend my days angry, replaying the court scene, dwelling on my parents' betrayal. But anger would only poison the life I was building. Instead, I chose to let it go. Not to forget, and certainly not to reconcile, but to release the hold it had on me. I started jogging every morning before work, running through the quiet streets as the sun came up. I joined a book club at the local library and met people who became friends. I volunteered at a community garden on weekends, digging in the dirt alongside others who just wanted to make something grow. One Saturday in February, I was planting tomatoes at the garden when a woman about my age struck up a conversation. Her name was Lauren, and she'd just moved to the area for a new job. We talked about gardening, about adjusting to new places, about building lives from scratch. When we left, we exchanged numbers. "Maybe we could grab coffee sometime," she suggested. "I'd like that." I was building a new family, I realized. Not one bound by blood or obligation, but one chosen, deliberately made up of people who valued kindness and honesty and mutual support. This family showed up when I needed them. This family celebrated my successes without resentment. This family didn't ask me to make myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. In March, the tulips I'd planted came up bright red and yellow and pink. I stood in my front yard, coffee in hand, watching them sway in the breeze. Patricia came out and admired them from her porch. "Beautiful," she called over. "Thank you." Sarah visited that weekend, and we had the dinner party I'd promised. 8 people around my oak table, laughing and talking and passing dishes family style. I looked around at these people, my chosen family, and felt a contentment I'd never experienced growing up. After everyone left and I was washing dishes, Sarah came up beside me with a towel to dry. "You seem happy," she said. "I am. I'm proud of you. What you did standing up to them, it took real courage. It didn't feel brave. It felt necessary. That's what bravery is." I thought about my parents, sometimes wondered how they were doing, if they'd learned anything from what happened. But I didn't reach out, and they didn't either. That door was closed, and I had no desire to reopen it. I learned that you can grieve something you never really had. I grieved the family I'd wished for as a child, the one where I was valued and supported and loved unconditionally. But I also celebrated the family I'd built as an adult, the one where love was based on mutual respect and genuine care. My house became more than just a building. It was proof that I could survive on my own, that I could work toward a goal and achieve it, that I didn't need anyone's permission or approval to build the life I wanted. Every room held a memory of my journey. The living room where I'd cried happy tears when I first got the keys. The kitchen where I'd baked cookies for neighbors. The bedroom where I slept peacefully, no longer worried about what my family might demand next. I was free. Free from expectations that were impossible to meet. Free from criticism that had nothing to do with who I actually was. Free from the obligation to sacrifice myself for people who saw me as less important than my sister. And in that freedom I found something I'd been searching for my whole life. Peace. Have you ever had to choose between family and your own well-being? Have you ever stood up for what you earned even when it cost you relationships? Drop a comment below and share your story. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to protect what you've built, even from family. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it wasn't easy to hear, and it certainly wasn't easy to live through. But I'm sharing it because I want you to know that you're not alone if you're facing something similar. You're not selfish for keeping what you earned. You're not wrong for setting boundaries. And you're not responsible for other people's choices to be entitled or unfair. I wish you strength, peace, and the courage to build the life you deserve, whoever that includes or excludes. Take care of yourselves, and remember, sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with strangers. They're fought with the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. But winning those battles, standing up for yourself, protecting what you've worked for, that's when you finally learn what you're truly worth.